Hi, welcome to Scratching the Surface. I'm Jarrett Fuller, and this is my podcast about design criticism and practice. In this first episode of 2017, I am talking to Armin Vit, who, of course, is behind the Under Consideration empire with his wife, Bryony Gomez Palacio, which is probably most known for the popular logo blog Brand New, but also includes blogs on print design, menu design, and they run the popular Brand New conference. In this conversation, I talked to Armin about how he started blogging, the origins of Speak Up, which was the popular design blog that he ran in the early 2000s, and then why he decided to shut it down in 2009. We talk about the evolution of design criticism, logos, and what, if any, value there is in a design discourse. For those of you who have listened to previous episodes of this podcast, you know that design blogs of the early 2000s were very influential in my design education, and Speak Up was easily one of the most important. And so it was great to talk to Armin about his thoughts on writing and ask him about how blogs and social media have changed over the years. So without any more delay, enjoy my conversation with Armin Vit. I kind of want to start. I told this story to Michael Beirut when I interviewed him also. I kind of came to design when I was in high school around 2002, 2003. I grew up in suburban Pennsylvania, had never met a real graphic designer before. And so my first introduction to graphic design was online in 2002, 2003 was kind of right at the beginning of design blogs. And so things like Design Observer and then Speak Up were pretty influential to me in kind of my earliest design education. And so I kind of thought that would be a good place to start. I was curious kind of how you started blogging and what that kind of experience was like for you kind of in those early days.
Yeah, so I came into blogging mostly by two things. One would be a little bit of a discontent with kind of like the state of what people online, what designers online were talking about when they talked about graphic design. And at the time, this was like as the dot-com bubble burst, and everything was about flash animations and 3D exploding polygon things that look cool as hell, but had no meaning whatsoever. So that was one thing where I thought like there should be something online where traditional graphic designers that were trained in print and logo and identity, that they could talk about the things that they found interesting other than this all this other tangential stuff that was mostly stylistic. And then at the same time, I had stumbled on a blog called Typographica, which I got involved by leaving comments, and I enjoyed the reading because it was all about type and typography and typefaces. And after leaving a few comments, they invited me to be a regular author on the site, and that was my first. The first time I saw how a blog actually worked, and this was movable type, and I had gotten some experience on designing websites from my time at March 1st in Atlanta, Georgia, which was my first job. So I knew how to do HTML, not very good, but enough that I could do something. And then coupled with movable type, I thought, this is something I could do. So pairing those two things, I thought I'll just start a blog where I'll say whatever I want because I have opinions about stuff. I don't know if they're good, valid, or anyone will really care, but I'll just start it and see what happens. And yeah, I mean, I just started writing about things that I liked or didn't like. And then I started emailing. I was like, no one knew about the blog Speak Up. There was no reason why anyone would know about it. So I had to do some PR for myself, and I just emailed like Steve Heller and Michael Beirut and Michael Rock and everyone that I thought should be reading my blog. And some of them did, some of them didn't, some of them passed it on to other people. And then next thing you know, people are like paying attention to things that I'm writing and having an opinion on my opinion or an opinion on the thing that I'm having an opinion on. And it was just like, oh my God, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
So that was the start.
And so you, after you started Speak Up, you then kind of branched off onto some other kind of other topics, more specific, like Brand New and the print blog. Were those all? Did those all kind of start? There was overlap between those, correct?
There was a slight overlap between Brand New and Speak Up, and that's actually part of an interesting part of the story. Speak Up started in 2002, 2003, and for the next 2-3 years, it just grew and grew, both in the audience as well as the quality of the writing. I matured from a 25-year-old when I started to a very wise 28-year-old. So it and it was nice to see that evolution growing from something that was just kind of like, hey, look at this is cool, or hey,
Right.
look at this sucks, into something that actually provided something of value to other people. And that was partly because of me, partly because of the other writers that started becoming regular authors on the site. And then as the quality of the writing grew and as the engagement of the people in the comments got more intense, like the comments on Speak Up were like real discussions, and people got really into it. And then eventually, then there was the UPS logo redesign,
Oh,
and
right.
that changed a lot. That took us from like 100 comments a day to like a thing where it had 300 comments, and it was like, oh my God, I can't believe what they did to the Paul Brand logo. And so we saw that there was some potential, there was interest in talking about logos, and then a few other big logo changes came about, like the VH1 and United Way, and the discussions tended to be, oh, this sucks, this doesn't suck, as opposed to like the 500 word comments that we were getting used to. And then part of the criticism about Speak Up was, oh, this is just a place where people come to say how much something sucks, and logo discussions are not as interesting as those, whatever, talking about certification or Emigre or
Right.
AIGA or whatever. So then in 2006, I thought, all right, fine, I'll put all these logo discussions on its own blog, and that's how Brand New started. And I think we posted like 1 or 2 things a week on Brand New. Sorry, my dog is barking. Sorry,
That's all right.
the mail came. So
That's
anyway,
fine.
all right. So with Brand New, it started slowly. And then that just snowballed in what it is today, which is a really large blog. And what was interesting was that a lot of designers were like, no, we shouldn't be having these important discussions about logos. And now everybody wants to talk about logos.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to talk to you about, is because I feel like in a lot of ways you were kind of ahead of the discussion with Brand New, and there are more people talking about logos now than probably ever before in history, and this has come up in a couple of the interviews that I've done. How has that changed? Has that changed at all how you think about what Brand New is as a site?
Yeah, I think it does, because in the last year, whenever there's a big logo change, I used to have like no competition, like no one talked about logos, and now I have to compete against Wired and Vanity Fair and Huffington Post. So I can't compete either in volume of the audience, just because those sites are huge. I also cannot compete on speed. Like they'll have 10 writers ready to go at any time. Where like, I usually post Brand New. I'll prepare the post that's between 5 and 6:30 in the morning, and then that's it. Like I wait till the next day. So if something
Right.
breaks at 10 a.m., it's not going to be on Brand New until the next day, and that's like slow,
Right. Yeah.
in internet time.
Yeah.
So I can't compete on those accounts, but what I can do is like I'm gonna be able to talk about this in a way that all these other magazines can't. And one is nerding out about the technicalities of a logo, what it does well, what it doesn't do well, and I'm able to rationalize it better than, a Fast Company. I mean, they have some good articles, but when they talk about logos, it's like they're in a competition of
Yeah,
like who
yeah,
can be the snarkiest about it, and they get nothing meaningful written. So, in that way, it's like I'm gonna do the best. I'm gonna do it rationally, and to the more often than not, I'll get a few better images than other websites, like some design firms. They'll save, a couple of images for me. So there's a little bit of that going on, but at the end, it's just like this is what I do, this is what I know, and I'm pretty sure I can write about it better and in a more meaningful way than any of these other bigger outlets.
yeah.
And it's not because I'm a better writer or a better critic. I just have been doing it since 2006.
Right.
So it's by sheer repetition, I've gotten good at it, and I kind of know what our audience wants to read from us that they cannot get from somewhere else.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have two kind of questions, kind of going off that. There are two parts to it. One is, how has that? Do you still do client design work at all, or are you all kind of only working on your own projects now?
I would say it's 10% work for clients, 90% for us.
Oh, okay. Has that have write? Let me think how to phrase this. Has that writing about branding and logos changed your own design process or how you think about design? And then the second part of the question is, how do you think that your kind of like running commentary on this has changed, and the value that that kind of brings to the design profession as a whole?
Right. So I think to the first part, I'm not sure it has changed other than, I mean, it affects in that whenever we do design something, and when the things that we design are for our same audience that we're writing for. So,
Mm-hmm.
I may write about, the detriments of a logo, and then to that same audience, I'm saying, come to our brand new conference, which is going to be great. And that brand new conference has an identity for it. So
Right.
if I don't, like literally, if I don't walk the walk, I can't talk the talk. If I don't put my money where my mouth is,
Yeah.
so it forces me to that whatever we do has to be either really good or just really, really weird, where people are like, I have no idea how to comment on this. So it has forced us to figure out ways to do things that are a little bit different, or that build upon the things that we're writing. I think if our business relied on doing work for clients, we would have a really hard time,
Yeah.
kind of like following what we preach, just because it's really hard. I mean, doing really good design work on a really consistent basis for clients is hard. So having that kind of like magnifying glass reflected back on us based on what we write would be really tiring.
Right.
So to a degree, I'm glad we don't have to put up like client case studies on a regular basis for people to critique us back. So when it's like again, like when it comes back to the things that we do, we're designing for designers, so we have a little bit more leeway, and
Mm-hmm.
we can do whatever we want, and we can say like, if you don't like it, well, too bad. We did it for us. We paid for it. That's what it
Right.
is. So there's that, and then the second part of the question was how, if my writing has, or if like the writing about logos has an influence on the industry,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
yeah. So I think if I think it's I repeat this a lot, but what I do on Brand New isn't so much criticism. It's more like sports commentator, being a sports commentator where you're calling the plays,
Yeah.
and like Marv Albert has watched whatever 10,000 basketball games, so he knows how to talk the language. He knows how things work. He knows what's what. And I think that's what I end up doing on Brand New, which is just calling it as I see it. And I think people pay attention to some of the technicalities about what I write. Whether if I point out some kerning, or if I point out like, oh, you shouldn't pair two sans serifs that look almost alike, but they're not exactly alike or not too different. And if they go back and they're like, oh, there's two typefaces that we chose, maybe that's not right. Maybe there's a little bit of that. And then there's also like the more superficial level where, I've gotten designers at, large design firms that tell me that their client is saying, we don't want to get smashed on Brand New by Armin, so please do a good job for us.
Wow.
So there's a little bit of that influence that, is gratifying at an ego level, but I don't know what else it does other than maybe kind of like get rid of some shitty design in the world, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually kind of amazing. I'm curious. That was something I wanted to ask you about, that kind of snap judgment that you kind of have to make, because you are responding to it immediately. And so I think that's I think that's an interesting analogy. The sports commentator. Has that gotten easier for you now that you've been doing this for 10 years? Can you kind of form a paragraph or two or more kind of right away when you see a rebrand?
Yeah, it's almost like the moment I see it, I know whether I like it or not, and kind of like what my impression is, and what I can what can I compare it to, what can I relate it to, what has come before it, what does it have to do with the audience. So yeah, a lot of it is just kind of like doing it having done it every day for a lot of days. So there's an ease to that, and kind of like this criticism that we shouldn't criticize a logo without seeing it in action over time. Like, well, that's, as people, we form first impressions on everything, on other people, on packaging on the shelves, on a fruit on the, you might grab an apple and you're like, I don't like how this looks, but, it might be the best tasting apple, or it looks great, but it doesn't. So I think there's something about first impressions and snap judgments. I think there's something valid to them. Sure, it'd be great to see a logo released, wait 2 years, and then write an opinion. but then like no one would read that.
Right.
Like people come to the site because they want to hear about the latest thing, and they want to have an opinion about it right away, and then they want to move on to whatever comes the next day.
Yeah.
Yes, I think the trick is being able to say something meaningful within a short period of time, and yeah, a lot of it just has to do with a general understanding of how, because having worked at Pentagram at other design firms, that gave me the insight of how things work on the client side with big clients and what it takes to get these things done. So, it's nice to have had that experience, because then I know some of the kind of like inner mechanisms of how design firms work, how clients work, and then there's like a kind of like a mystery phase between when a client and a designer agree on something and then they launch it. Then like a year can pass, a lot of people can get involved. So that's usually whenever you see something that launches badly, it's just because it's kind of like that mystery phase that
Right.
something happened along the way. But anyway, yeah, part of it is just most of it is just being familiar with how it works inside and outside.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious now, kind of thinking about that. How have you seen? Well, so you started Speak Up in 2002, and then you started Brand New in 2006, and so that's now been going for 10 years, and then Speak Up closed probably around 2009-ish, I think.
Mm-hmm.
How in that time, kind of, how do you feel like the discourse in the design community has changed? And I'm thinking of things like social media and things like that.
Yeah, and it's the 99% the reason why we closed Speak Up. We started noticing that people were on Speak Up instead of leaving a comment. For a while, like between 2007 and 2009, a lot of people and companies started their own blogs thinking that that's where they would put their opinions, and that took away some of the energy in the comments on Speak Up. Then
Huh.
Twitter came about, and people started to put their opinions on Twitter, saying like, "Oh, I read this on Speak Up, and this is what I think." Twitter and Facebook, whatever, instead of on Speak Up, which was at some point it was the only place where you could do it, or Design Observer, or whatever. But the moment that everyone had the tool to share a tiny opinion and have other people react to it, that took away, that kind of like decentralized the place where you would have discussions. And it also kind of like shrunk the attention span that people had to read
Yeah.
anything longer than a paragraph or 140
Yeah.
characters. And I like me myself, I had run out of energy to write longer pieces because in part because again running out of energy, and also there was no feedback. There was no like literal feedback from the audience. So like, all right, maybe we have all run out of energy. We just don't want to do this anymore. And I think in the years since, between 2009, since we closed Speak Up, and now, I haven't really read. I don't read as much graphic design as I used to. Partly because there isn't that much out there. Partly because
Yeah.
I got kind of like saturated for a while. But now, like if I wanted to read something meaty about graphic design, I don't even know where to start or where to look. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people just want, and finally, kind of like the last nail in the coffin for any kind of like design writing is Instagram, where it's just like a visual onslaught of stuff.
Yeah.
And anything that you have to read is just painful. If you can just look at something
Right.
and be provoked or be entertained or whatever, then that's much more feasible in the long term and more kind of like short term satisfaction for most people than sitting down and saying, all right, I'm going to read a 2,000 word essay on graphic design.
Right.
Doesn't really hold the same appeal.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a possibility for a Speak Up type site or something like that anymore? Or do you think that that's just a thing of the past now, and that we're moving into a kind of a new way to talk about this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, every now and then I get every now and then I think maybe there should be like a Speak Up revival, but it's like no one is gonna read it. Like no one is really gonna give a shit.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is because people are more interested in doing and putting things out there and consuming things than talking or writing about graphic design. And like I myself, I don't really want to write about graphic design and do think pieces about graphic design because I'm not sure how much it matters. And that's like a horrible thing to say to in general, and specifically to someone who's doing
Right.
a master's dissertation on this subject. But I think it's a weird time for design writing, and a lot of it has to do with just how much and how cool visual stuff there is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean that's interesting, and that's kind of what I was curious about, and I think some of the reason why I'm even doing this project is because of my own doubts of how much value it even adds. And so it's interesting to kind of hear your side of it as someone who's done that, and is kind of doing it in a different way now. I think is actually really interesting. My last question, just to kind of wrap it up a little bit, which is kind of related to that, is: are there any kind of like issues or topics in the design profession that you think need more discourse around them, the way that logos have it, for example?
That's a hard thing to answer because I think we're all doing pretty okay. I think we're doing good work. I think in the kind of like the early discourse of like 1980s, 1990s of what is our purpose as graphic designers, what is how should we kind of like, what are we meant to do with this kind of like power that we have? I think we figured that out, and some people went and did things for social change. Some people went and did packaging. Some other people went and did startups. Other people like us, we thought, well, let's generate content for other designers. So I think those questions kind of like help separate the design profession into more areas of specialization. And it's like, all right, you do packaging, you make money, go,
right,
go wild. I'm gonna stick with my cultural clients, or I'm gonna do things that are meaningful in the social sphere, and I'm gonna struggle financially, and that's perfectly fine. I think we've come to grips with that, and I think part of it had to do with all that writing. I think nowadays, and again, like logo design, I don't think that I mean, maybe it benefits the industry in a strange way, but I don't think we depend on it. I think if we didn't talk about logos, we would just keep doing them. Some would suck less, some would be great.
Right.
But I'm not sure if there's any specific area that would benefit. I think the area that is on everyone's mind is diversity, and what does diversity mean in graphic design? Like, I'm a designer. I'm originally from Mexico. Does that have any effect in how I design or how I should be designing? If you're woman or man, does that have should that somehow kind of like manifest itself in how people design? Does it matter? So I think that's the one area that people are focusing on, but mostly they're focusing on that. How come they're not represented if they're out there?
Right.
And that's just a matter of, I don't know what's a matter of. It's just the way it is, for better or for worse. So maybe there's something there, and I think the AIGA is doing a good job on that, and so I think there's areas for improvement, but I don't know how much our future depends on it.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. I think there is something to it of more of less kind of like what the profession is and just how we operate and what we kind of bring to it. I think is actually a really interesting topic. And I just kind of want to end by thanking you again for your time. I thought this was really interesting and really helpful, and your writing has had a really profound impact on my work. So I really, really appreciate your time and talking with me.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
This episode was recorded on July 22nd, 2016. Our theme music is by Andy Borgasani. We're on Twitter @Surface Podcast. You can find us on iTunes and SoundCloud and at scratchingthesurface.fm. Thanks for listening.